The steel door stood in absolute darkness, cold metal drinking what little light her phone offered. Elena Morrison's palm pressed against the biometric scanner, skin slick with basement water, and her own blood from the cut on her hand. The paper trembled in her grip, four numbers in elegant script, her grandmother's handwriting reaching across death itself. Behind this door lived $265 million and the answer to 27 years of silence. The green light pulsed like a mechanical heartbeat, waiting for her to prove she belonged. But 4 weeks ago, she had never heard of this mansion. 4 weeks ago, she was drowning. The county courthouse smelled of floor wax and institutional despair. Elena sat rigid on the wooden bench, Danny beside her with his backpack clutched tight, both of them pretending this was somehow normal. Judge Morrison, no relation, cruelly shuffled papers while Elena's landlord's attorney droned numbers that might as well have been death sentences. $2,400 in back rent, 3 months overdue, eviction proceedings standard and unavoidable. She had worked 83 hours last week across 3 jobs, and still the math defeated her. The numbers simply refused to cooperate no matter how many times she recalculated them on the back of grocery receipts at 3 in the morning. Movement in the gallery caught her attention. A man in an expensive suit leaned against the back wall, arms crossed, mouth curved in something between amusement and contempt. Mid-50s, silver at his temples, the kind of tan that came from leisure rather than labor. He whispered something to the younger man beside him, both of them studying her like an interesting specimen. The judge granted a 30-day extension. 30 days to produce money that did not exist, to solve an equation with no solution. Elena stood, legs unsteady, and the man from the gallery materialized in her path. His cologne cost more than her monthly grocery budget. His card said Marcus Whitmore, commercial real estate development. His voice carried the lazy confidence of someone who had never been afraid of anything. Single moms, 3 jobs, still can't make rent. It's almost tragic. Danny's hand found hers, squeezed hard. Elena said nothing, tried to move past. Should have made better life choices, sweetheart. But hey, I'll be buying your building next month anyway. You'll be out on the street regardless. The words landed with surgical precision. People like you don't climb out of holes. You just dig them deeper. Elena finally met his eyes. Something in her gaze made his smile falter, just slightly, just for a heartbeat. We'll see. She walked past him, Danny in tow, Marcus Whitmore's laughter following them into the parking lot. Now, at 3 in the morning, Elena sat at their cramped kitchen table, staring at the photograph that had upended what little remained of her understanding. Rain drummed against the window where the leak had started again. Bucket positioned to catch the steady drip that punctuated her insomnia. The math homework spread before her, not Danny's, but hers, the eternal calculation of survival. $950 for rent, 200 utilities, 300 groceries if she clipped every coupon and bought nothing fresh, 180 for Danny's school fees. Her 3 jobs netted roughly $2,600 a month, which left exactly $0 for the bucket, with a hole in the bottom. Janitor at the downtown office complex, $11 an hour, her knees perpetually raw from scrubbing floors, executives never noticed. Warehouse inventory, specialist, $13 an hour, her back a constant geography of aches from lifting boxes that shouldn't require lifting if the machinery worked properly, which it never did. Weekend waitress at Morelli's Diner, $9 plus tips that averaged maybe $60 if she was lucky, and smiled hard enough at men who left phone numbers on receipts. Her hands looked older than her 34 years, calluses layered over calluses, knuckles permanently swollen. She knew every crack in the sidewalk between here and all 3 jobs, had memorized which sections of pavement her feet could navigate in the dark when she left for the office complex at 4:30 each morning. The photograph drew her attention back. Yellowed paper, edges curling inward like a secret trying to keep itself. Her mother Sarah stood young and genuinely happy beside an older woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that managed to be both kind and fierce. On the back, Sarah's handwriting, Mom and me. Elena had never known her grandmother existed. In 34 years, her mother had mentioned this woman exactly once, and only when dying had stripped away the filters that normally govern speech. The hospital had smelled of antiseptic and the particular chemical sweetness they used to mask other smells. Sarah's skin had gone translucent, her body collapsing inward as the cancer consumed what remained. The hospice nurse had stepped out, giving them privacy for what everyone understood was the end, and Sarah's eyes had focused with sudden desperate clarity. Her mother's hand had grabbed hers with surprising strength for someone so diminished. The words came urgent, tumbling over each other in the race against the morphine that was already pulling her back under. Mama Charlie, I need to tell you about Mama Charlie. Elena had leaned closer, confused, half thinking this was the medication speaking. I was wrong, Elena. So wrong to keep you apart. My foolish pride, my stubborn, stupid anger. Mom, who are you talking about? Who's Mama Charlie? Your grandmother, she never abandoned us like I told you. I was the one who cut her off. I did that. I threw away 27 years because I was hurt and young and couldn't forgive her for choosing. The coughing had started then, violent spasms that brought nurses running with practiced urgency. By the time Sarah's body calmed, consciousness had fled for good. Those fractured sentences became her final words, a confession incomplete and haunting. For 5 years, Elena had dismissed it as confusion, the desperate rambling of a mind losing its grip on reality. Now this photograph suggested otherwise, and the weight of potential truth sat heavy as stone in her chest. The coffee maker sputtered to life at 4:30, the only luxury she permitted herself, and even that felt like moral weakness some days. Through the wall came the neighbor's television already blaring, some pre-dawn infomercials selling solutions to problems regular people couldn't afford to have. On the pull-out couch that served as his bedroom, Danny stirred beneath the thin blanket she had bought at Goodwill 3 years ago. You didn't sleep again. Not a question. Her 15-year-old son had learned to read her moods the way children of struggling, single parents always did, developing an emotional radar born from necessity and proximity to adult stress. Come here, baby. She showed him the photograph, explained what little she understood about the mystery woman standing beside her mother. Danny studied it with the serious attention he brought to his calculus homework. The same focus that earned him honor roll every semester, despite doing assignments by phone light when the electricity got shut off. He was such a good kid, better than she deserved, and that knowledge carved a hollow space beneath her ribs. Last week, she had found the permission slip hidden in his backpack, unsigned for the state mathematics competition. $200 for travel and hotel, which might as well have been $2 million. He had not even asked because he already knew the answer, had learned early to measure his dreams against her bank account and adjust accordingly. Maybe your grandmother's still alive. Maybe you could find her. The hope in his voice hurt worse than any amount of exhaustion. That evening, bone-tired from 8 hours moving boxes in the warehouse, Elena found the cream-colored envelope taped to their apartment door. Her stomach dropped with Pavlovian dread. Every unexpected envelope triggered the same fear of eviction notices, court summons, collection agencies. But the paper felt expensive, heavy stock with an embossed letterhead she did not recognize. Inside Thornton and Associates, Estate Attorneys, Atlanta, Georgia. She read the first line 3 times before her brain would process the meaning. Dear Miss Morrison, we are writing to inform you that you have been named as the sole beneficiary in the estate of Charlotte Morrison, deceased as of October 3rd of this year. Charlotte Morrison, Mama Charlie. Her grandmother had been alive all these years, living just a few states away. Her grandmother had died only weeks ago. Her grandmother had left her everything. As executive of Miss Morrison's will, we are required to notify you of your inheritance, which includes substantial real property located in Fitzgerald, Georgia. We request your presence at our offices at your earliest convenience to discuss the terms of inheritance and transfer of deed. Danny appeared in the doorway, saw her face, knew immediately something had shifted. Mom, what's wrong? You look like you saw a ghost. In some way she had. The ghost of a relationship that never existed. A grandmother who loved her from a distance she had never known spanned between them. That night she searched online with desperate focus. Fitzgerald, Georgia, population 9,000, 3 hours south of Atlanta. Nothing particularly remarkable about it. She found Charlotte Morrison's obituary in the local paper. Brief and impersonal. 89 years old, devoted housekeeper for over 5 decades, preceded in death by her daughter Sarah, survived by her granddaughter Elena, and great-grandson Danny, housekeeper. The word triggered something buried in memory, a fragment of conversation overheard when she was perhaps 7 or 8. Her mother crying in the next room, voice ragged with anger, shouting at someone on the telephone. She chose that family over us. She chose them instead of her own daughter. Elena had never understood what those words meant, had filed them away in the collection of childhood mysteries that seemed important at the time, but faded into background noise. Now they demanded re-examination. 2 weeks later, they were driving through rural Georgia in a rental car that cost $75 that they absolutely could not spare. But something deeper than logic insisted this mattered more than any paycheck. She had taken unpaid leave from all 3 jobs, might actually lose them over this absence. But her gut said the risk was necessary. The GPS led them off the highway onto progressively narrower roads until they hit dirt, branches scraping the car's roof, creating a tunnel of green that filtered afternoon sunlight into something golden and almost holy. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, that particular shade of purple-gray that meant serious weather building. Then the trees released them, and Elena's foot hit the brakes so hard Danny pitched forward against his seatbelt. "Oh my God!" The mansion rose from the Georgia earth like something displaced from another century entirely. 3 stories of weathered stone and dark timber, wrap-around porches on every level, a grand entrance with double doors that could have admitted carriages. Ivy climbed the walls in thick waves. Several windows showed cracks or missing panes entirely. The roof sagged visibly in places. But even through the obvious decay, the bones sang with craftsmanship and care. Elena's warehouse-trained eye caught the solid lines of the foundation, the quality of the stonework, the kind of construction that outlasted generations. People like her did not inherit mansions. They inherited debt and exhaustion and the grinding knowledge that tomorrow would be exactly as hard as today. Danny's whisper matched her thoughts. "This is completely insane." Before she could respond, tires crunched on gravel behind them. A black SUV tore down the driveway with deliberate aggression, pulling up close enough to pin their rental against the overgrown hedge. The door opened and Marcus Whitmore stepped out, his smile sharp as wire. "Well, well, the courthouse loser. Heard through the grapevine you inherited a dump." He circled the mansion like a vulture assessing carrion, running a hand along the stone with proprietary ease. "Properties condemned or will be soon enough. Structures unsound. I've already filed complaints with the county inspector. You'll never afford the repairs." Elena found her voice, forcing it steady. "This property isn't for sale." His laugh carried genuine amusement. "You're drowning in debt, working 3 jobs for peanuts, about to be evicted from that Roach Motel in Nashville. This place needs $500,000 minimum just to be habitable. Where exactly will you get that money? Food stamps?" The mockery landed like physical blows. Danny's hand found hers, squeezed hard. "I'm offering you $50,000, which is more than this dump's worth. You take my offer or watch the county bulldoze it in 30 days. He handed her a business card, the same one he had given her at the courthouse, like he had known even then that he would somehow circle back to her life. 48 hours. Then I go to the city council with the safety violations I've already documented. This is me being generous, sweetheart." The SUV kicked up gravel as it departed, leaving Elena shaking with a rage so pure it almost felt cleansing. "I will not let that bastard win." Danny's voice came small and uncertain. "Mom, maybe he's right. We can't afford—" "Your great-grandmother left this to us for a reason. We're finding out what." The brass key waited behind a loose shutter exactly where the letter had indicated, along with an envelope bearing her name in elegant script. Charlotte's handwriting matched the numbers on the paper from her mother's photograph, and something in Elena's chest recognized the loops and precise angles as family. "Elena, if you are reading this, then I am gone and you have finally found your way here. I am deeply sorry I was not part of your life. Your mother had her reasons for keeping us apart, and I respected those boundaries, even though doing so broke my heart every single day. This house holds far more than you can possibly imagine. Walk through these rooms carefully. Pay attention to everything. Look closely. Your grandmother who loved you always, even from a distance you never knew existed. Charlie." The heavy front door groaned on rusted hinges, a sound like something wounded and old. Dust exploded into the air, motes dancing in the failing light like spirits disturbed from long slumber. The smell hit immediate and overwhelming. Old wood soaked in time, decay sweetened by mildew, and underneath it all, something hauntingly familiar. Ginger and lavender mixed together, a scent that triggered sense memory from before language. From a time when Elena was too young to form conscious recollection, the grand foyer stretched before them, water-stained walls and peeling wallpaper revealing the layers beneath like archaeological strata. But her warehouse training caught the details that mattered. Load-bearing beams still solid, foundation showing no cracks, the kind of bones that could be restored if someone cared enough to try. This isn't a dump, it's a diamond covered in dirt. The living room walls displayed gold records in expensive frames, dozens of them, each commemorating platinum sales and industry awards. Photographs everywhere, a visual history of American country music, and at the center of almost every image, Kenny Rogers, young Kenny with the guitar, middle-aged Kenny shaking hands with presidents, older Kenny performing before thousands of adoring fans. Kenny relaxed in this very room, surrounded by famous faces whose names Elena half remembered from her mother's radio. And in every single photograph, hovering at the edge of the frame, never quite in the center but always visibly present, a woman with kind eyes and silver hair, Charlotte Morrison. Not a guest at the party, but part of the infrastructure that made the party possible. Danny found a leather-bound guest book on the side table, opened it to reveal 53 years of entries in Charlotte's meticulous handwriting. The entries read like a life witnessed from slightly outside the spotlight. Kenny arrived today exhausted from tour, made him chicken soup, and drew a bath. Kenny's birthday celebration, baked his favorite apple pie with the lattice crust he loves. Kenny in the studio until 4 a.m., left fresh coffee and sandwiches outside the door so he would eat something. The footsteps began as dusk thickened into dark, slow and deliberate, coming from somewhere above them, the measured tread of someone searching systematically through rooms. Elena and Danny froze, caught in the paralysis of prey animals suddenly aware of predators. The floorboards creaked with weight. A door opened with the particular groan of old hinges. The footsteps moved methodically, patient, unhurried. Danny's grip on her arm went vice-tight. "Mom, we need to leave. Right now." They crept toward the back of the house, avoiding the main staircase, seeking any exit that did not require passing through whatever space the footsteps occupied. Lightning flashed through broken windows, throwing shadows that moved with nightmare logic. Thunder followed close enough to rattle the glass still intact in its frames. They burst through a side door into rain that had just begun, ran for the rental car with that particular terror of being pursued even when no pursuer is visible. Elena's hands shook so badly she dropped the keys twice before getting the engine started. Through the rearview mirror, backlit by another lightning flash, a figure standing in the mansion doorway. Not following, just watching them flee. They spent the night in the car, parked at the end of the driveway, doors locked, rain hammering the roof in waves. The storm raged with that peculiar intensity Georgia could summon, wind shaking the small vehicle, thunder close enough to feel in their chests. Danny dozed fitfully against the window. Elena stayed awake, staring at the mansion through the rain-blurred windshield. Every practical instinct screamed at her to drive back to Nashville, return to the known misery of 3 jobs and 1-bedroom poverty. But Charlotte's letter echoed in her mind. Pay attention to everything. Look closely, her grandmother had not left her a mansion by accident. There was something here she was meant to find, meant to understand, and running away meant surrendering not just the property, but the answers to questions that had haunted her family for nearly 3 decades. When pale dawn light finally filtered through the pine trees, the storm had passed, and Elena's resolve had hardened into something unbreakable. "We're going back in there." Danny's voice came rough with exhaustion and fear. "Mom, there's someone inside that house. Someone who isn't us. Then we find out who they are and what they want. I didn't drive 300 miles and risk losing all my jobs to run away because of some creaking floorboards." Morning light transformed the mansion from threatening to merely sad, like a cathedral slowly being reclaimed by patient nature. They entered armed with flashlights and the tire iron from the trunk. Elena's warehouse instincts taking over. Assess the space, identify threats, control what could be controlled. The gold records looked different in daylight, less ominous, more like historical artifacts. She could read the dates now, trace Kenny Rogers' career through platinum sales and award show appearances. In one photo, younger Charlotte stood beside Kenny at what looked like a private dinner, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. The ease between them spoke of decades, not employment, but something deeper. Danny called out from across the room, his voice careful and controlled. "Mom, look at this." A locked display case held a yellowed newspaper clipping under glass, the headline large enough to read from several feet away. Kenny Rogers credits housekeeper with saving my life. The article beneath offered no details, just vague references to a difficult period and the importance of loyal friends, but the headline itself suggested a story far more complex than simple domestic employment. Elena was trying to open the case when a voice spoke from behind them, calm and measured. "You'll need the key for that." She spun fast enough to make herself dizzy, tire iron raised, heart slamming against ribs. An elderly black man stood in the doorway wearing work clothes and boots caked with red Georgia clay. Early 70s, weathered face, kind eyes, tool belt suggesting practical competence. "Who the hell are you?" He raised his hands in peaceful surrender. "Benjamin Carter. I was Kenny's groundskeeper and property manager for 35 years. Been watching over this estate since your grandmother moved to the nursing home 2 years back. Convenient. She dies and you're still here." No accusation in her tone, just warehouse-trained skepticism about anything that seemed too easy. "She paid me to stay. Full salary for 2 years to maintain the property and wait. Said her granddaughter would come eventually. Made me promise not to interfere until you were ready. You were here last night. You scared us half to death." Benjamin nodded acknowledgement. "Saw an unfamiliar car on the security camera I installed. Came to investigate. Your grandmother told me to test you first. See if you'd run or stand your ground." He studied Elena with something that might have been approval. "You came back. That means something." The tour began with Charlotte's room, reached by climbing stairs to the second floor and walking past lavish guest suites that spoke of wealth and comfort. At the very end of the hallway, Benjamin opened a door to reveal something that made Elena's throat close with emotion. The room measured perhaps 10 by 12 feet. A narrow single bed covered with a handmade quilt, simple wooden furniture, a nightstand holding a single photograph of a baby that Elena recognized as herself from the copies her mother kept. The faint smell of ginger and lavender came from sachets in the dresser drawer, preserved across years. "For 53 years, this is where your grandmother lived. Not in those fancy suites, here. By choice, bae." The springs creaked softly as Elena sat on the bed, the quilt worn smooth from countless washings but still intact, hand-stitched with the kind of patience that belonged to a different era. Danny's voice came small and confused. Why would she choose this tiny room when she had a whole mansion? Because she understood what mattered. It wasn't about luxury. The trunk at the foot of the bed held treasures more valuable than any amount of money. Dozens of leather journals, one for each year, spines labeled in Charlotte's meticulous hand. Elena opened the volume marked 1992 and found her own name appearing regularly in the entries. "Kenny asked about my granddaughter again today. I showed him the school photograph Rita sent last month. He studied it for a long time, said Grace has her grandmother's eyes, beautiful and strong. It breaks my heart that my granddaughter doesn't know I exist. But Rita made her choice and I must respect it, even if doing so kills me slowly, day by day, year by year." The handwriting blurred as tears pooled and fell. Danny pulled out the journal from 1999, began reading entries aloud. "Rita called today. After 15 years of complete silence, I heard my daughter's voice and nearly dropped the telephone from shock. She told me she was getting married to a good man. She didn't invite me to the wedding. She just wanted me to know it was happening. I told her I was happy for her, which was true. I didn't tell her that I have carefully saved every single photograph she ever sent, that I know my granddaughter's face better than I know my own reflection, that I pray for them both every night before sleep." Danny's voice broke on the last sentence. Elena wrapped an arm around him, both of them crying for a woman they had never met, but who had loved them fiercely across an impossible distance. Deeper in the trunk, beneath years of journals, Elena found a letter on expensive personal stationery bearing Kenny Rogers' embossed name. The date read 2011, the handwriting shaky but still legible. Danny read it aloud, giving voice to words written more than a decade ago. Maggie, I've been thinking a great deal about legacy lately. Not the music, those songs will outlive me whether I want them to or not. But real legacy, the kind that actually changes individual lives for the better. You have profoundly changed mine. You showed me that genuine loyalty cannot be purchased with any amount of money. It must be earned through years of consistent action. I want your granddaughter to understand someday that her grandmother was one of the finest human beings I have ever had the privilege to know. The letter fell from Danny's hands. He looked at Elena with dawning understanding. Great-grandma saved Kenny Rogers' life? Benjamin spoke for the first time in several minutes. Yes, and he spent the rest of his life repaying that debt. But that's for you to discover. Charlotte left a path. You need to follow it. The library occupied the mansion's west wing, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves holding thousands of volumes organized with the same meticulous care evident in Charlotte's journals. Elena walked the perimeter, her warehouse spatial reasoning automatically calculating dimensions. Something felt wrong. She paced the length of the room, counting steps, cross-referencing against her memory of the mansion's exterior measurements. This wall should extend another 8 feet based on the outside dimensions, but the bookshelf stops here. Danny caught her excitement immediately. Like a secret room? In an actual mansion? Benjamin's smile held quiet pride. Your grandmother said you'd notice. You have her sharp eyes. They searched systematically, Elena checking the floor for scratch marks, Benjamin tapping walls for hollow sounds, Danny methodically examining every book on the shelves. An hour passed with nothing to show for their efforts. Storm clouds gathered again outside the windows, dimming the afternoon light, creating that particular atmospheric pressure that precedes serious weather. Danny worked his way along the bottom shelf with the organized patience he brought to mathematics homework, pulling each spine to check for abnormalities. Most books slid out normally. But when his hand reached a leather-bound copy of Kenny Rogers' memoir, The Gambler, the spine refused to move. Instead, the entire book tilted forward like a lever. A deep click echoed from inside the wall. A pneumatic hiss followed. Everyone froze as an entire section of bookshelf swung inward on hinges so perfectly concealed that even close inspection would have missed them. Danny's triumphant yell echoed through the library. I found it! Mom, I actually found it! Elena hugged him tight, fierce pride mixing with growing apprehension about what they were about to discover. Behind the bookcase, darkness yawned. Cool air flowed out carrying the smell of metal and electronics, a sharp contrast to the mansion's aged wood and dust. The steel door waited in shadow, ultra-modern and completely incongruous with the Victorian architecture surrounding it. A green scanner panel pulsed with steady light, its rhythm almost organic. Engraved into the metal an elegant script, for Charlie and those who belonged to her. Danny reached toward the scanner, but Benjamin caught his wrist gently. Not you, your mother. He turned to Elena with an expression that mixed respect and something like anticipation. 2 years ago, when Charlotte's health started failing seriously, she had this installed. High-level security system, biometric recognition. She obtained legal copies of your records, birth certificate, driver's license, court documents from your eviction hearing, had all your data registered into the system. The implications settled over Elena like snow accumulating. She was tracking me? Preparing for you. There's a difference. Lena placed her palm against the scanner. Green light swept across her skin in 3 slow passes. The panel beeped 3 times. Then nothing. The scanner flashed red. Letters appeared on the small screen. Backup power failure. Benjamin checked the panel with practiced efficiency. Main system's operational, but the backup generator's dead. Security grid won't activate without it. We need to restore power. He looked at Elena with something that might have been a test. Generators in the basement. The basement door had swollen with age and moisture, groaning like something in pain when Benjamin forced it open. Stairs descended into darkness so complete that Elena's phone flashlight seemed to make it worse somehow, the beams swallowed rather than illuminating. The smell of damp earth and mold rose to meet them, along with the sound of water dripping in echo chamber acoustics. Elena stood at the top of the stairs, hand gripping the railing, and discovered a fear she had never articulated to anyone. The thought of descending into that confined space made her chest tighten with something approaching panic. Danny moved toward the stairs. "I'll go, Mom. You don't have to." "No." Her voice came out harder than intended. She softened it slightly. "This is my inheritance, my challenge. Your great-grandmother left this for me to prove myself." Benjamin spoke quietly. Charlotte knew about fear. She said the only courage that matters is the kind that makes you do the necessary thing anyway. Elena descended one step at a time, testing each before committing her weight, phone held ahead like a talisman against the dark. The stone walls felt slick with moisture beneath her palm. At the bottom, cold water covered her shoes immediately, ankle deep and shockingly frigid. The sounds magnified in the enclosed space, her own breathing harsh and too fast, water sloshing with each step, pipes dripping somewhere in the darkness. Something small and alive scurrying away from her light. The generator waited at the far end of the basement, industrial and covered in dust, an old manual taped to the wall beside it with yellowed, water-stained pages. Elena's warehouse mechanical knowledge activated. Fuel gauge read empty. She found cans in the corner, but they weighed more than expected. Required 3 trips back and forth through the dark water to transport enough. Her hand slipped on the pouring spout, fuel splashing across the generator's housing. The metal edges had rusted sharp. As she reached to adjust the fuel line, her palm dragged across a jagged piece of steel. Pain flared immediate and fierce. Blood welled dark in the phone's light, dripping into the standing water below. Danny's voice echoed down the stairs. "Mom, you okay?" "Just a scratch. I'm fine." She wrapped the cut in the hem of her shirt, hands shaking from more than pain. The starter switch required 3 hard pulls before the generator caught. When it finally roared to life, the sound in the confined space felt like standing inside a jet engine. Lights flickered throughout the basement, revealing the extent of the flooding, the water-damaged walls, the scope of deterioration. But they also revealed something else. On the opposite wall, barely visible behind old furniture and stored equipment, a second steel door identical to the one upstairs. The word storage stenciled across it in faded paint. Elena made a mental note, filed it away for later investigation. Right now, she needed to get out of this basement before the walls closed in entirely. She climbed back up with blood-soaked shirt hem and trembling legs, but she had done what needed doing. Danny saw the blood and went pale, but Elena waved him off. "Worth it. Let's see what Grandma left us." The scanner glowed steady green now, powered by the restored generator. Elena placed her palm against it again, and this time the mechanical voice spoke clearly. Identity confirmed, Elena Morrison. 3 beeps. Heavy locks disengaged with metallic clunks that spoke of serious security. The pneumatic hiss of seals releasing after years of waiting. The door swung inward on perfectly maintained hinges, revealing a 10 by 10 room lined with metal shelving. Automatic lights clicked on, illuminating organized boxes, folders, and stacks of official documents. Property deeds sat in the first folder Elena opened. This Georgia estate, a condominium in Nashville, a beachfront house in Florida, a working ranch in Texas, all registered legally in Charlotte Morrison's name with clear title. Insurance policies totaling $750,000. A lockbox near the back held $50,000 in crisp $100 bills, neatly bundled. Benjamin's voice came quiet and awed. "This is only the first vault, Elena. Look." He pointed to the back wall where another door waited, smaller, older, with an old-fashioned combination lock. An envelope taped to it bore Elena's name in Charlotte's familiar script. Inside, a single piece of paper with 4 numbers, 33, 17, 41, 9, and a message that made her eyes blur with tears. "These numbers are for you alone, Elena. Everything beyond this door belongs to you now. I earned every penny honestly through decades of hard work. I give it freely with all my love. Use it wisely. Use it kindly. Let it free you from struggle the way it could never free me from heartache. I love you. I always loved you every single day." Grandma Charlie. Elena's phone erupted with notifications before she could fully process the letter. Texts, calls, alerts flooding in simultaneously. She pulled it out, confused, and saw the news headline that had somehow already found her. Local single mom inherits legendary Rogers estate. Her face filled the screen, her old apartment address printed below. The article contained details that should have been private: her eviction hearing, her 3 jobs, Charlotte's death, the mansion's estimated value. Danny's phone buzzed with the same alerts. He looked at her with dawning horror. Mom, how did they get all this information? Someone leaked it. Someone wanted this public. Benjamin moved to the window, his body language shifting to high alert. We have company. Multiple vehicles. Elena joined him at the window. 3 cars pulled up the driveway, moving fast, kicking up dust and gravel, and at the front of the convoy, leading them like a general marshaling troops. Marcus Whitmore's black SUV. The distant relatives poured out first, cousins Elena had never heard of until this moment. Behind them, Marcus emerged with his trademark smirk, playing conductor to a symphony of greed and entitlement. The first knock came hard enough to rattle the door in its frame. Elena took a breath, squared her shoulders, and prepared for a different kind of battle than the one she had fought that day. The real siege was just beginning. The cousin who shoved through the door first introduced himself as Jerry, 40-something and aggressive in the way of men who had spent their lives feeling cheated by circumstances they refused to examine. Behind him came Linda, 50s and weaponizing sweetness like poison and honey, her voice dripping with false concern as she swept into the foyer without invitation. Now, Elena, honey, let's be reasonable about this. Charlotte would have wanted family to share. We're blood too, even if she forgot about us toward the end. Marcus Whitmore leaned against the doorframe with theatrical casualness, his presence the real threat behind these amateur intimidators. 3 more strangers clustered behind him, each clutching phones and papers like they were already dividing assets. Elena positioned herself between them and the library where the vault waited open. Benjamin moved to flank her, silent but solid. Danny stayed close, younger than everyone present, but standing straighter than he ever had in Nashville. Jerry moved deeper into the room, touching things, evaluating, his eyes calculating resale value with practiced speed. This place is worth millions. We all deserve a piece. Charlotte was my great-aunt, same bloodline as you. This property has legal protection. You're trespassing. Linda's sweetness curdled slightly. Don't be selfish, dear. Family means sharing. Your grandmother would be ashamed to see you acting this way. The presumption ignited something cold and furious in Elena's chest. These people had never met Charlotte, never sent a card or made a phone call, never wondered if she was alive or dead. Now they showed up with lawyers and entitlement, ready to pick the bones. Marcus pushed off from the doorframe, taking control with the confidence of someone who had orchestrated this entire circus. I've done the math. Split 4 ways, that's still 7 figures each after taxes. Or Elena can sell to me now, avoid years of legal battles, and everyone walks away with something. Benjamin stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of decades in legal practice. This property is protected by an ironclad will. Elena Morrison is the sole beneficiary, named explicitly and without ambiguity. You have no legal standing. Jerry sneered with practiced contempt. Old man, shut your mouth. You're just hired help. Danny spoke before Elena could, his voice shaking slightly but holding firm. Don't talk to Mr. Carter like that. The laugh that followed was cruel enough to make Elena's hands curl into fists. Jerry looked at Danny with undisguised mockery. Kid's got spirit. Shame his mother's a loser who can't even afford rent. Elena grabbed Jerry's collar with warehouse-strengthened hands, the fabric bunching in her grip as she shoved him backward hard enough that he stumbled. Get out, now, or I call the sheriff and have all of you arrested for trespassing. Jerry recovered his balance, shocked by the physical contact, reassessing. Marcus intervened smoothly, playing peacemaker while directing the chaos he had created. Everyone calmed down. Elena, check your email. I sent you something interesting. She pulled out her phone with her free hand, still ready to physically remove Jerry if necessary. The email contained a PDF attachment, an official county inspector's report dated that morning. She scanned the contents with growing dread. Property condemned pending repairs. Structure deemed unsafe for habitation. Estimated repair costs exceeding $600,000. Owner has 30 days to comply or face demolition proceedings. Marcus watched her face as she absorbed the trap he had constructed. I expedited the inspection, called in a few favors with the county. You can't afford those repairs on a janitor's salary. My offer stands, $75,000, cash, today. Or you can watch the bulldozers arrive in a month. The math was simple and brutal. She had maybe $3,000 in total assets counting the cash in the vault. $600,000 might as well be $6 million. You leaked my information to the press, created this circus to pressure me into selling. His smile confirmed what she already knew. Business is business, sweetheart. 30 days. Clock's ticking. The relatives joined the chorus, their voices overlapping in desperate harmony. Take the deal. Split it 4 ways. We all need money. Jerry added threats about lawyers and lawsuits and rights they clearly did not possess. Linda kept repeating family obligations like a mantra designed to induce guilt. Benjamin pulled Elena aside while the chaos continued, his voice low and urgent. Don't decide now. The will has protections Charlotte built in. She anticipated vultures. Elena looked at this mansion with new eyes, seeing not decay but potential, not burden but opportunity. Marcus had made a critical miscalculation. He thought she would fold under pressure because she had always folded before, had spent 15 years bending to circumstances she could not control. But something had changed in the basement when she forced herself down those stairs despite the fear. Some internal architecture had shifted, crystallizing into something harder than Marcus Whitmore's money could penetrate. I'm not selling. Not to you, not to anyone. This mansion stays in my family. Marcus's smile disappeared, replaced by something colder and more calculating. Then prepare for war. I'll see you in 30 days when the county posts the demolition notice. The convoy departed with less swagger than they had arrived, leaving Elena, Danny, and Benjamin in the echoing silence of the foyer. Night had fallen while they argued, and the mansion felt suddenly vast and vulnerable. Benjamin checked the windows methodically, his military bearings suggesting experience with perimeter security. They'll be back. Marcus doesn't take no for an answer, and desperate relatives are unpredictable. We need to secure this place, Danny spoke up, surprising both of them. And we need to figure out what's behind that second door. Great-grandma left us something important. They spent 2 hours that evening cataloging the first vault's contents. Elena photographed everything with her phone before touching anything. Warehouse inventory protocol applied to family inheritance. The property deeds represented a real estate portfolio worth conservatively $3 million. The insurance policies could be liquidated for 3/4 of their face value if necessary. The cash provided immediate operating capital. But the combination lock on the second door defied every attempt at opening. Elena tried the numbers from Charlotte's note in every conceivable order. 33, 17, 41, 9, right, left, produced nothing. Reversed gave the same result. Split into pairs, combined, multiplied. The lock remained stubbornly closed. Benjamin studied the letter with professional attention. Charlotte was meticulous. She never made mistakes. If the combination doesn't work, it means these numbers are instructions, not the answer. Danny had already pulled out his phone, creating a spreadsheet of every number appearing in Charlotte's journals. He worked with the focused intensity he brought to mathematics competitions, cross-referencing dates, addresses, recurring patterns. Past midnight, exhaustion dragged at all of them. They locked the vault, secured the mansion as best they could, and settled into the least damaged guest rooms. Elena lay awake listening to the house settle, every creak and groan a potential threat. When she finally slept, her dreams filled with combination locks and Marcus Whitmore's mocking smile. The crash came at 2:30, glass shattering somewhere on the main floor. Elena snapped awake immediately, adrenaline burning through the fog of sleep. She grabbed her phone and the tire iron that had never left her side, moving silently down the hallway to wake Danny and Benjamin. 3 quick knocks, their prearranged signal. Benjamin emerged already dressed, some military instinct keeping him ready. Danny came out in seconds, phone in hand, with 911 ready to dial. Male voices drifted up from below, making no effort at stealth now that entry had been achieved. 2 men, maybe 3, discussing the vault's location with casual certainty. Find the library. Marcus said there's a hidden door behind the bookshelf. Old lady had it wired with high-tech security, but we got the codes. Elena felt her blood ice over. Marcus had not just filed complaints and brought relatives. He had hired professionals to break in and steal whatever the vaults contained. Benjamin's whisper came barely audible. Sheriff's 20 minutes out minimum. We need to slow them down. Elena's warehouse training kicked in with cold clarity. She knew this layout now, had spent hours exploring. The intruders had the disadvantage of unfamiliar territory and the assumption of an undefended target. Danny, back to your room. Lock the door. Call 911 and don't come out until the sheriff arrives. His protest died when he saw her expression. This was not negotiable. Benjamin, can you kill the lights from here? He moved to the hallway breaker panel, hand on the main switch. Elena positioned herself at the top of the grand staircase, tire iron in one hand, phone flashlight ready in the other. The chandelier in the foyer below threw enough light to see the intruders, two large men in dark clothes, moving with professional efficiency toward the library. She called down, voice steady despite her hammering heart. Police are coming. Leave now and maybe you avoid felony charges. The first intruder turned, flashlight beam sweeping up the stairs to catch her in its glare. His laugh held no humor, just professional contempt. Lady, we know you're alone up there with a kid and an old man. Marcus said we get 10% of whatever we find in that vault. That's worth a few hours in county lockup. I spent 15 years working 3 jobs, getting ground down by this world. You think I'm scared of punks like you? The second intruder started up the stairs. Elena waited until he was 3 steps from the top, then kicked the heavy antique vase positioned near the railing. It tumbled down with spectacular violence, ceramic exploding against wood and stone, shards spraying like shrapnel. The intruder yelled and fell backward, crashing into his partner. Benjamin hit the breaker. Darkness dropped like a curtain. The intruders cursed, phone flashlights bobbing as they tried to orient themselves. Elena descended in silence, years of night shifts teaching her to navigate darkness by memory and feel. She knew where each step creaked, which section of railing was loose, the exact distance to the foyer floor. The first intruder's flashlight swept past her position. She waited until he turned away, then struck his knee with the tire iron. Not hard enough to shatter, but sufficient to drop him. His scream echoed through the house. Benjamin appeared from the side hallway, swinging a heavy flashlight like a club. It connected with the second intruder's shoulder with a meaty thud. The man staggered but grabbed Benjamin's arm, using weight advantage to slam the older man against the wall. Elena hit him from behind, tire iron striking his lower back. He released Benjamin and spun toward her with rage replacing professionalism. He was larger, stronger, younger. But she had 15 years of warehouse fights, of learning to defend herself in spaces where men assumed weakness, of finding leverage points and pressure targets. She ducked his swing, drove her knee into his groin, followed with an elbow to his face when he doubled over. He went down hard. Sirens finally wailed in the distance, red and blue lights beginning to paint the trees outside. The first intruder tried to crawl toward the broken window, dragging his injured leg. Benjamin stood over him until the sheriff's deputies flooded through the door. The interrogation lasted 2 hours, deputies taking statements, while the intruders were cuffed and loaded into separate vehicles. Both men claimed Marcus Whitmore had hired them, offered 10% of whatever they recovered from the vault, provided security codes and floor plans. Marcus arrived as they were being taken away, his alibi smooth and prepared. He had been at a county planning meeting. 20 witnesses could confirm his presence. When the deputies questioned him, he expressed shock and dismay that anyone would think he was involved. The sheriff was skeptical, but lacked evidence to contradict the alibi. After the law enforcement convoy departed, Marcus approached Elena one final time. Dawn was breaking, painting the Georgia sky in shades of amber and gold. This is what happens when you refuse reasonable offers. Your inheritance attracts criminals. For your safety and your son's, sell to me before someone gets hurt. Elena stood on the porch, exhausted and bruised but unbroken. Those men worked for you. Everyone knows it even if we can't prove it. You're finished, Marcus. His smile held no warmth, just calculation and threat. 30 days until demolition. Enjoy your crumbling mansion while it lasts. By mid-morning, the media circus had intensified beyond anything Elena had imagined. News vans camped at the property entrance. Helicopters circled overhead. Her phone rang constantly with reporters demanding interviews. The story had achieved viral status. Single mom, janitor inherits millions, fights off armed intruders, defies wealthy developer. Danny's school called to report media presence on campus, students being approached for comments. Neighbors from their Nashville apartment had been interviewed, their names and faces broadcast nationally. The invasion of privacy felt like violation. Benjamin brought coffee and practical assessment. You can't go back to Nashville. They know where you live, where Danny goes to school. This mansion is actually the safest place right now. Elena stared at the combination lock on the second vault door, Charlotte's cryptic numbers mocking her exhaustion. 4 numbers that meant everything and explained nothing. Her grandmother had anticipated threats and obstacles, but apparently believed Elena possessed some insight or knowledge that would make the puzzle solvable. Danny appeared with his laptop and the triumph of discovery lighting his face. Mom, I figured it out. The numbers aren't a combination. They're coordinates. He turned the laptop to show his spreadsheet, cross-referencing entries from Charlotte's journals with the mansion's layout. Great-grandma reorganized Kenny Rogers' entire archive system. She documented it in her 2001 journal, created a grid system like warehouse inventory, section, shelf, box, item. The numbers are location coordinates, not a lock combination. Elena grabbed the laptop, scanning Danny's work. He had mapped every storage reference in Charlotte's journals, identifying a comprehensive organizational structure that applied to the mansion's basement storage area. You're a genius. Where do we look? Danny was already moving toward the basement stairs. Section 33, Shelf 17, Box 41, Item 9. According to her notes, that's in the climate-controlled storage room near the generator. The basement felt less threatening in daylight, though water still covered the floor and the smell of mold remained pervasive. The steel door marked storage open to reveal a room that defied the deterioration surrounding it. Climate-controlled, organized with precision, shelves labeled with numbers that matched Charlotte's system exactly. Section 30, Shelf 17, Box 41 sat at eye level, a manila folder labeled with the number 9 inside. Elena pulled it out with hands that had started shaking again, but this time from anticipation rather than fear. The folder contained the original partnership agreement between Kenny Rogers and Charlotte Morrison, dated 2001, with handwritten notes in the margins. On one page, Charlotte's distinctive script appeared beside the legal language. Real combination requires 3 elements. Birth year inverted plus years of service plus lucky number. Work it out, granddaughter. You're smart enough. Elena did the math aloud. Birth year 1934 inverted is 4391. No, that's not right. The digits reversed, 4391. Or 34 reversed is 43, 19 reversed is 91. Benjamin studied the note. Try it as individual components. Birth year Charlotte started working, 1970. Years of service, 53. Lucky number, that's usually 7. Danny grabbed a piece of paper, working through combinations. What if it's simpler? Year she started 70, not 1970s. Years she worked, 53. And her birth year's last 2 digits, then lucky 7. Elena tried the combination with her pulse pounding in her ears. 17, 53, 43, 07. The lock clicked open with satisfying finality. The second vault measured 20 by 20 feet, and the moment Elena swung the door wide, automatic lights revealed a space that belonged in a different universe than the decaying mansion above. Climate-controlled, humidity sensors monitoring conditions, this room represented serious wealth and serious security. Safety deposit boxes lined 3 walls from floor to ceiling, brass keys waiting in their locks like promises. The central table held a leather journal that screamed expensive, its cover embossed with Charlotte's initials. Elena opened it with Danny and Benjamin flanking her, all 3 of them aware they were crossing a threshold into knowledge that would reshape everything they thought they understood. Charlotte's handwriting filled the pages with meticulous detail. The entries began in 2001 and documented the partnership agreement. But more than that, they revealed the relationship between Charlotte and Kenny Rogers, with an intimacy that transcended employer-employee dynamics. Danny read aloud, his young voice giving life to words written decades ago. January 15th, 2001. Kenny called me into his office today with such a serious expression, I feared he was letting me go. Instead, he pushed legal papers across the desk and told me he was making me a full partner in his real estate holdings. 10% of everything, retroactive to when the properties were acquired. I said it was too generous. He told me to stop arguing and sign, said I'd been managing his household finances for 29 years, had saved him more money than any accountant, and I was the only person in his entire life who had never asked him for anything. Time someone gave me everything I deserved. The journal continued with investment details, property acquisitions, financial decisions made with Charlotte's input and guidance. Each entry revealed a business partnership built on mutual respect and trust that had accumulated value across decades. The progression was documented with precision: 2002 profits of $47,000. 2005 Texas ranch purchase that tripled in value within a decade. 2010 Florida beachfront property acquisition just before the market turned upward. 2015 portfolio valued at $85 million. After Kenny's death in 2020, the estate settlement left Charlotte's share at over $200 million. The final entry, dated 2023, estimated total current value at $287 million. Elena sat down heavily, legs refusing to support her weight. Danny leaned against the wall, face pale. Benjamin simply nodded as though this confirmed suspicions he had held for years. The safety deposit boxes yielded treasures that defied comprehension. Box 1 contained bearer bonds, 200 of them, each worth $10,000, $2 million in a single container. Box 2 held corporate bonds from IBM, General Electric, Apple, blue-chip securities purchased when prices were fractions of current values. Box 3 contained stock certificates that made Elena's hands shake. Early Amazon, Microsoft, Google, bought in the 1990s when tech stocks seemed like risky speculation. Benjamin checked values on his phone, his voice stunned. Conservative estimate on Box 3 alone, $15 million. Box 4 held gold coins, American Eagles, by the hundred. Box 5 contained jewelry that belonged in museums rather than private collections. Diamonds catching light like trapped stars, emeralds deep as forests, rubies that seemed to pulse with internal fire. Elena stopped opening boxes at number 10. Her brain refused to process the scale of wealth surrounding them. 42 boxes total, each containing assets beyond her comprehension. The sound of vehicles arrived before Elena could fully absorb what they had discovered. Benjamin checked the window with practiced vigilance, his body language shifting to high alert. 3 SUVs, legal team by the look of it, and the lead vehicle? He didn't need to finish. Elena knew who was coming. Victoria Rogers emerged from the lead SUV like a general preparing for war. 58, expensive suit, cold eyes that suggested a lifetime of getting exactly what she wanted. 3 lawyers followed with briefcases and tablets, documents already prepared. She didn't knock so much as announce her presence with fist strikes that echoed through the mansion. Elena opened the door to face Kenny Rogers' daughter with courthouse composure barely masking exhaustion. Victoria thrust papers into Elena's hands without preamble or civility. I'm contesting this inheritance. My father was elderly and vulnerable when he created this partnership. Undue influence, mental incapacity, fraudulent manipulation. I'm freezing all assets pending investigation. You won't see a penny until I'm satisfied justice has been served. The lawyers pushed past into the foyer, immediately beginning documentation procedures. They could not access the vaults without the biometric locks, but they photographed everything else with clinical efficiency. Victoria stood in the center of the room that had been her father's sanctuary and saw only real estate to be evaluated and assets to be recovered. Charlotte Morrison was a housekeeper, domestic help. She had no right to this wealth, no matter what arrangement my father thought he was making. Elena's warehouse backbone materialized, the same steel that had allowed her to work 3 jobs and raise Danny alone for 15 years. Your father gave Charlotte a legally executed partnership. She earned every penny through 53 years of loyalty and excellence. This isn't theft, it's compensation. Victoria's smile was ice in litigation. We'll see what the courts say. My lawyers estimate this will take 3 years minimum. Can you afford legal representation for 3 years? Can you even afford lawyers for 3 months? The question landed with precision. Elena had $3,000 in accessible funds. Victoria commanded generational wealth and unlimited legal resources. My offer is this. Give up your claim, take $100,000 cash, walk away, or fight me for years while your son grows up in poverty, waiting for a resolution that may never come. Danny spoke from the stairs where he had been listening, his voice carrying conviction beyond his years. We're fighting. Great-grandma earned this. We're not giving up. Victoria barely glanced at him, dismissing his existence with practiced ease. After her legal team finished documenting the mansion's interior, careful to note every repair needed, every structural deficiency that supported the case for mental incapacity and anyone who would give away such valuable property, the convoy departed with Elena's refusal hanging in the air like a declared war. Benjamin surveyed the damage of their presence with grim assessment. She has resources and connections. This won't be quick or easy. Elena looked at the mansion with new understanding. Marcus had given her 30 days before demolition proceedings. Victoria had frozen the assets that could have funded repairs. The trap had teeth that closed from multiple directions simultaneously. But Charlotte had not spent 53 years planning only to leave her granddaughter with wealth that evaporated under legal pressure. There had to be protections built into this inheritance, mechanisms that would withstand challenges and provide the resources to defend what had been earned. We make this place work for us while we fight. Marcus gave us 30 days to prove structural soundness. We have 50,000 in cash, tools, and 3 people who know how to work. We saved this mansion ourselves. Danny caught her determination immediately. How? Those repairs cost 600,000. Elena walked to the window, studying the grounds with warehouse efficiency eyes that saw systems and logistics rather than just decay. We prioritize. Focus on life safety issues the inspector cited: roof leaks, broken windows, foundation cracks. Cosmetic damage doesn't matter for code compliance. We do the work ourselves and prove Marcus wrong about what people like us can accomplish. Benjamin nodded slowly, professional respect growing in his expression. I've got 40 years of construction experience. You've got warehouse skills and janitorial knowledge. We might actually pull this off. They began that afternoon, Elena creating a grid system on paper that mapped every critical repair. Roof leaks took priority. Water damage accelerated deterioration exponentially. Benjamin climbed to assess the shingles with Elena behind him. Warehouse training, helping her overcome the height fear that wanted to drag her back to ground level. The Georgia sun beat down with brutal intensity, tar smell mixing with sweat, hands blistering despite gloves. Each shingle replaced represented a stake driven into Marcus Whitmore's assumption that she would fail. Every nail hammered home built not just a roof, but a future that belonged to her, rather than being dictated by circumstances she could not control. Danny hauled materials with the determination of someone who had finally found a way to contribute meaningfully. He learned to measure, cut, fit pieces together with Benjamin's patient instruction. The work bonded them in ways that regular family dinners never could. The shared purpose creating connection deeper than blood alone. Neighbors stopped to watch the spectacle of a single mother on a mansion roof in 100-degree heat, refusing to accept defeat. Some offered help, bringing cold water and sandwiches. Others mocked the futility, pointing out that 3 people could not possibly restore a property this damaged in 30 days. Marcus drove past on day 3, slowing to observe Elena 20 feet up with a hammer. His smile through the windshield carried pure contempt. She met his eyes and kept working, each strike of the hammer answering his mockery with something more permanent than words. By week 2, transformation became visible. Windows replaced, their gleaming surfaces reflecting sunlight instead of gaping darkness. Walls pressure washed revealed honey-colored stone instead of grime and mildew. The porch rebuilt with Georgia pine regained structural integrity and visual grace. The storm arrived on day 16, dark clouds gathering with that particular purple-gray that promised serious weather. They scrambled to cover incomplete sections with tarps, racing against the first drops. Rain came in sheets, wind testing every repair they had made. water finding weaknesses in their work. They took shelter in the kitchen, soaked and exhausted, eating sandwiches on the floor while thunder shook the walls. Danny laughed first, the absurdity of their situation finally breaking through the tension. Elena joined him, then Benjamin, all three of them collapsing into the kind of laughter that comes from surviving something difficult together. This is crazy. This is absolutely insane. Danny wiped tears from his eyes, still grinning. But it's the most fun I've ever had. Elena studied her son, taller than when they had arrived, stronger, carrying himself with confidence, earned through competence rather than borrowed from bravado. This work had transformed him as much as it was transforming the mansion. We're building something. That matters more than you know. By day 23, local news returned to document the progress. The reporter who had covered the inheritance story wanted an update on the embattled single mom fighting a wealthy developer. She walked through rooms that had gone from decay to restoration, filming before and after sequences that told the story better than any narration could. Elena stood on the renovated porch, wearing work clothes and holding a hammer, and spoke directly to the camera. This house represents my grandmother's 53 years of loyalty and excellence. I won't let anyone take that away because they think people like us don't deserve what we've earned. The segment went viral within hours, the David and Goliath narrative resonating with millions of viewers who saw their own struggles reflected in this battle. Donations arrived unsolicited, contractors offered services at cost. The foundation of public support building beneath Elena's feet. Marcus filed another complaint on day 25. Unlicensed construction, safety violations, improper permits. The inspector returned with clipboard and skepticism, expecting to find amateur work that justified condemnation. Benjamin had prepared for this inevitability. Every repair documented, permits obtained through proper channels, work performed to code standards. The inspector walked through with increasing surprise, testing structural elements, checking electrical and plumbing, examining the quality of workmanship. This is professional-grade restoration. Who's your contractor? Elena gestured to herself and Benjamin. We are. The inspector's respect showed in his careful re-examination, looking for flaws that simply did not exist. His final report reversed the demolition order, certified the mansion as structurally sound and safe for occupancy, noted that the restoration exceeded minimum code requirements. Marcus's power play evaporated under the weight of documented competence, but Elena knew him well enough by now to understand that defeat would only make him more dangerous. The break-in came during week 4, 2:30 in the morning, professional silence replacing the earlier intruder's noise. Elena woke to instinct rather than sound. Some warehouse honed awareness, detecting wrongness in the darkness. She moved through the hallway, checking on Danny and Benjamin, found both awake and alert. 4 men this time, moving through the first floor with tactical precision toward the library. One remained outside in the black SUV, engine running, driver's door open. Elena recognized the silhouette behind the wheel despite darkness and distance. Marcus Whitmore had come personally to ensure this theft succeeded where the earlier attempt had failed. Benjamin pressed the fire alarm panel Benjamin had rewired earlier that week, the shriek piercing enough to wake neighbors half a mile distant. The intruders paused for only a heartbeat before continuing their systematic approach toward the library. These were not amateurs startled by noise. They wore tactical gear and moved with military efficiency, communicating through hand signals Elena recognized from warehouse security training. She grabbed the fire extinguisher from the hallway, its weight familiar from years of safety inspections. Danny already had his phone recording, capturing everything through a crack in the guest room door. Benjamin positioned himself at the servants' staircase, ready to evacuate if the situation deteriorated beyond recovery. The bookcase mechanism engaged with its distinctive pneumatic hiss. The intruders had somehow obtained the security codes, probably purchased from the same inspector Marcus had bribed earlier. 4 men converged on the steel door, one producing a tablet displaying override sequences. Elena descended the main stairs with deliberate heaviness, making herself known rather than attempting stealth. The lead intruder turned, assessment calculating, in his eyes. She recognized the professional evaluation, cataloging threat level, physical capabilities, likelihood of resistance worth considering. Buildings wired with cameras, sheriffs already been called, Every second you stay increases your sentence. The man's smile suggested he had heard similar warnings before, and found them rarely backed by meaningful consequence. Lady, we've been hired to retrieve specific items. Contract says we finish the job. You and the old man want to walk away. Now's your chance. Great-grandma left this to us. You're stealing from a 15-year-old kid. One of the other intruders laughed, the sound harsh in the mansion's acoustics. Marcus said you'd play the victim card. Told us you're just white trash who got lucky. Now step aside, or we move you aside. The words detonated something in Elena's chest that 15 years of poverty and humiliation had compressed into explosive potential. People like Marcus Whitmore had been moving people like her aside their entire lives, treating working poverty as moral failure rather than systemic design. Tonight the equation shifted. She pulled the pin on the fire extinguisher and aimed at the vault entrance. Last warning, leave now. The lead intruder moved toward her with the casual confidence of someone who had physically intimidated dozens of women into compliance. Elena squeezed the trigger. White chemical foam exploded outward in a pressurized cloud, filling the vault entrance, blinding everyone inside. The men cursed and stumbled, choking on the concentrated discharge. Elena slammed the steel door shut, hands finding the emergency lock mechanism Benjamin had showed her during their security assessment. Heavy bolts engaged from the outside, trapping 4 professional thieves in a climate-controlled vault with limited air supply and no exit. The 5th man, the one positioned as lookout near the library entrance, grabbed for her with anger replacing professionalism. Elena's warehouse reflexes activated pure and instinctive. She dropped the extinguisher, ducked his reach, drove her shoulder into his midsection with the full momentum of her body weight. They crashed into a bookshelf together, volumes tumbling down around them. He recovered faster, stronger, trained for exactly this kind of close-quarters combat. His fist caught her ribs, pain exploding white-hot. She tasted blood where her lips split against her teeth. But 15 years of working 3 jobs had taught her that enduring pain mattered less than refusing to quit. She grabbed a heavy bronze bookend from the fallen debris, swung it in a short arc that connected with his temple. He dropped, not unconscious but stunned enough that when Benjamin appeared with zip ties, they could secure his hands before he regained full coordination. Sirens announced law enforcement's arrival, red and blue lights painting the mansion's facade. Sheriff's deputies poured through the front entrance with weapons drawn, taking control with practiced efficiency. Elena leaned against the wall, ribs screaming, face bleeding, hands shaking with adrenaline crash. Danny emerged from his hiding place, phone still recording, capturing the moment deputies extracted 4 furious men from the vault where they had been shouting threats and promises of lawsuits. The lookout started talking immediately, offering information in exchange for consideration. His statement implicated Marcus Whitmore with devastating specificity, contract terms, payment structure, detailed floor plans Marcus had provided, explicit instructions about vault contents. Marcus was still sitting in his SUV when deputies surrounded the vehicle. His expression cycled through surprise, calculation, and finally resignation as they pulled him from the driver's seat. He met Elena's eyes across the driveway, and whatever he saw in her bloody, exhausted face made his carefully constructed confidence finally crack. People like me don't dig holes deeper, Marcus. We climb out. And people like you fall in. The next morning brought different visitors. Victoria Rogers arrived alone, without lawyers or legal documents, wearing jeans and a simple shirt that suggested something had shifted in her approach. She stood on the porch where Elena sat with ice pressed against her swollen ribs, waiting for permission to enter. I need to see where my father was happy, where he found peace. I need to understand what I've been fighting against. Elena could have refused. Every legal precedent supported her right to deny access to the woman actively contesting her inheritance. But something in Victoria's exhaustion mirrored her own, the recognition that they were both daughters trying to understand mothers and fathers who had somehow remained strangers despite proximity. Come in, I'll show you everything. The tour began in Kenny's music room, where gold records still lined walls alongside photographs documenting a career that had touched millions. Victoria touched instruments with careful reverence, reading song lyrics in her father's handwriting, seeing him through artifacts rather than memory. He never showed us this side, always performed, even at home. I spent my whole childhood trying to get his attention, and he was always somewhere else mentally, even when physically present. Elena led her to Charlotte's modest room at the hallway's end. Victoria sat on the narrow bed, studying the handmade quilt, the single photograph of baby Elena, the profound simplicity of everything. She lived here, in this small space, when she had access to millions. She understood what mattered. It wasn't about luxury or status. It was about purpose and dignity. Elena showed her Charlotte's journals, let her read entries spanning decades. Victoria's tears started around 1998 and didn't stop, falling on pages that documented her father's life with more intimacy than she had ever witnessed firsthand. Letters between Kenny and Charlotte revealed conversations they had never shared with family. Fears, doubts, moments of weakness and strength. One letter from Kenny to Charlotte, dated 2009, broke Victoria completely. "Maggie, I know my daughter thinks I never loved her enough. The truth is, I loved her so much it terrified me. Every time I looked at her, I saw all the ways I could fail as a father, all the damage my career choices inflicted on my family. With you, I could just be myself without the weight of disappointed expectations. That made you the person I turned to when I should have been turning toward my children. This wasn't your fault. This was mine. But by the time I understood that, the distance between us had grown too wide to cross." Victoria looked up with devastated comprehension. "He wrote this, but never sent it to me, never tried to explain. Some distances feel too permanent to risk crossing. My mother kept me from Charlotte for 27 years because of hurt she couldn't release. Unhealed pain makes us hurt the people who love us most." Victoria stood, walked to the window, composed herself with visible effort. "I'm not fighting you for money, Elena. I'm fighting because I needed to matter. I needed proof that I wasn't just an obligation he fulfilled while saving his real affection for strangers." Elena joined her at the window, both of them looking out at grounds transformed by weeks of backbreaking labor. "You always mattered to him. Charlotte saved his life, and that mattered differently, but not more. Both truths can exist simultaneously." The lawsuit withdrawal came the following week, accompanied by a public statement from Victoria that demolished her own case with brutal honesty. She acknowledged the video testimony they had discovered in the underground vault. Kenny's recorded statement, made 6 months before his death, explaining in excruciating detail his mental competence, the partnership's origins, and his explicit desire that Charlotte's inheritance remain inviolate. "After reviewing all evidence and visiting my father's private sanctuary, I am satisfied that Charlotte Morrison earned every penny through decades of loyal service. My father acted with full mental capacity and clear intention. I withdraw all challenges and offer my support to Ms. Morrison's plans for honoring both my father's legacy and Ms. Morrison's remarkable grandmother." The media narrative shifted overnight from contentious inheritance battle to redemption story. Victoria privately asked Elena about her plans for the mansion and the fortune it contained. "I want to build something that honors Charlotte and your father. Make the invisible workforce visible. Give people like me a chance to escape the poverty trap that kept me working 3 jobs for peanuts." Victoria's expression showed something Elena hadn't expected. Respect earned rather than granted. "I'd like to help if you'll have me on the foundation board." The Charlotte Morrison Foundation launched 6 months later with $85 million in initial capital. Elena had spent those months consulting with social workers, economists, and people who had actually lived the experience of working poverty. The resulting program structure reflected reality rather than charity organization fantasy. Full scholarships for single parents covered tuition, housing, childcare, and a living stipend sufficient to allow recipients to focus on education rather than survival. Job training programs for service workers partnered with unions and employers to create actual pathways to better wages rather than certificates that led nowhere. Emergency assistance prevented evictions and utility shutoffs, the small interventions that kept working families from tipping into homelessness. Dignity grants provided no-strings cash to people whose lives were exhausting enough without having to perform gratitude for every dollar received. The annual Invisible Workforce Honors Ceremony recognized housekeepers, janitors, caregivers, nursing assistants, the people who held society together while remaining functionally invisible to those they served. Each honoree received $25,000 in public acknowledgement of their worth. Watching a 60-year-old janitor cry on stage while accepting recognition for 40 years of excellent work destroyed Elena emotionally and rebuilt her understanding of what wealth could accomplish. First-year statistics arrived like validation. 50 single mothers completing degrees, 500 families staying housed, 2,000 service workers trained for higher-paying positions. Danny created a tutoring program for fellows children, applying his math competition skills to helping kids who had the same potential but none of the advantages. Victoria contributed an additional $10 million and recruited wealthy donors from her father's network, people who had benefited from Kenny's generosity and wanted to extend similar impact. The foundation became national news, a model for how inheritance could transform communities rather than simply transferring wealth between generations. The mansion's restoration required professional contractors for specialized work, but Elena, Danny, and Benjamin had done enough to establish the bones. $15 million and 8 months later, the building emerged from its chrysalis fully transformed while maintaining the character that made it historically significant. The contrast between before and after told a story more powerful than any marketing could achieve. Photographs displayed in the museum's entrance showed the mansion as Elena had first encountered it. Broken windows, ivy-choking walls, sagging porches, decay threatening to consume everything. Adjacent images revealed honey-colored stone gleaming in sunlight, windows reflecting Georgia sky, wraparound porches restored to Victorian glory, gardens manicured to perfection. Inside, original hardwood floors glowed with the warm patina of properly maintained age. Walls replastered and painted in historically accurate colors created spaces that felt both grand and intimate. Chandeliers rewired and cleaned cast light that made the entire structure seem to breathe. The smell shifted from mold and decay to beeswax polish and old wood preserved rather than rotting. The museum divided into 3 distinct sections, each telling essential parts of a larger story. The East Wing celebrated Kenny Rogers' musical legacy, gold records, stage costumes, guitars signed by collaborating artists, recording equipment that had captured songs now embedded in American cultural memory. Interactive exhibits let visitors hear his creative process, understand his artistic evolution, experience the work that had made him beloved across generations. The West Wing belonged entirely to Charlotte Morrison. Her modest room remained exactly as she had left it, preserved behind clear barriers that let visitors witness simplicity, chosen deliberately rather than imposed by circumstance. The narrow bed, handmade quilt, single photograph of baby Elena, these objects conveyed more about values and priorities than any explanatory text could achieve. Interactive exhibits invited visitors to calculate their own worth using Charlotte's model, hourly wage multiplied by years of service multiplied by excellence factor. The numbers that emerged shocked people into recognizing how dramatically society undervalued essential labor. Selections from her journals appeared projected on walls, her voice given presence through the written word. Video interviews with people who had known her, Benjamin, former colleagues, neighbors, constructed a portrait of someone who had understood that dignity came from within, rather than being granted by external circumstances. The central hall focused on the choice that had defined everything. Detailed displays explained 1970, Kenny's crisis, Charlotte's impossible decision between staying to prevent a suicide or returning home to her pregnant 17-year-old daughter. No villains appeared in this telling, just difficult choices made by imperfect people trying to navigate circumstances that offered no good options. Sarah's perspective included through excerpts from letters Elena had found, giving voice to the daughter's pain without diminishing Charlotte's legitimate reasons. Charlotte's room drew the longest lines and the most tears. Visitors stood in silence before the simple space, many weeping openly. The guest book filled with comments from housekeepers, janitors, caregivers, service workers who saw their own invisible lives reflected and honored. The museum became pilgrimage site for people who spent their lives cleaning other people's homes, caring for other people's children, making other people's comfort possible while receiving minimal recognition or compensation. First-year attendance exceeded 50,000. Third-year numbers climbed past 200,000. Service workers received free lifetime passes, converting the museum into a gathering place for people whose labor held society together. School groups toured free, educational programs teaching children that all honest work carried inherent dignity regardless of status markers society assigned. Marcus Whitmore's trial concluded 16 months after his arrest. Federal charges ensured serious consequences: conspiracy to commit burglary, attempted theft, bribery of public officials, witness intimidation. The evidence accumulated overwhelming and undeniable. Recorded phone calls, text messages, payments traced through multiple accounts, testimony from the men he had hired. Elena attended the sentencing hearing with Danny, now 18 and accepted to university pre-med, and Benjamin, who had become family through shared struggle rather than blood connection. Victoria joined them, this unlikely alliance born from tragedy and understanding. The judge's statement laid out Marcus's crimes with clinical precision before delivering sentence: 8 years federal prison, $2 million in fines, restitution to Elena for damages and legal costs. Marcus's real estate empire collapsed as business partners fled and properties were seized to satisfy judgments. The man who had mocked Elena at the courthouse for being unable to pay rent now faced prison and financial ruin. As deputies led him away in shackles, Marcus looked at Elena one final time. His expression held no remorse, just exhausted defeat. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction in his downfall. Justice had occurred, consequences had materialized, but revenge provided no emotional payoff. The important victory had been refusing to let his cruelty define her trajectory. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded them requesting statements. Elena kept her response brief and focused. Marcus Whitmore used wealth and influence to prey on vulnerable people. Now he'll face consequences. That's not revenge, that's accountability. A reporter pushed further, asking if she forgave him. Forgiveness is between him and whatever conscience he possesses. I just needed him to stop hurting people. Now he will. 3 years passed with the speed that follows when life finally contains purpose rather than just survival. The museum's gala opening arrived on a perfect Georgia evening, warm air carrying magnolia scent, lightning bugs beginning their evening performance. The mansion glowed with interior light, string quartet playing on the renovated front porch, fountain illuminated and flowing for the first time in decades. Elena greeted guests wearing nice clothes that were nonetheless practical, still driving a modest car visible in the parking area. She had money now, more money than she could spend across multiple lifetimes. But the experience of poverty had etched itself too deeply to allow wasteful display. Comfortable sufficiency replaced desperate scarcity, but she would never become the kind of person who forgot what struggle felt like. Danny gave tours to scholarship recipients, his pre-med studies informing his dream of serving underserved communities. He stood taller, carried himself with confidence earned through competence, spoke about his great-grandmother with pride in accomplishments rather than shame about occupation. Benjamin served as museum director emeritus, sharing stories with visitors while walking grounds he had maintained for 40 years. Victoria worked the crowd with the skill of someone born to wealth, but applying it toward meaningful purpose. The foundation board chair position had given her direction that decades of privilege never provided. Her relationship with Elena had evolved into genuine friendship. Two women who had fought each other before learning to fight together for something larger than individual grievance. During a quiet moment between speeches, a young woman approached Elena with 2 children clinging to her worn dress. Exhaustion carved lines into a face too young for such weariness. Elena recognized the look immediately, the desperate calculation of someone working multiple jobs while raising kids alone, math that never quite added up no matter how many hours got sacrificed. The woman's voice came hesitant, apologetic for existing. "I'm sorry to bother you during your fancy party. I needed to ask, why do you do all this? You could keep that money, live anywhere in the world, do anything you want. Why give it away to people like us?" Elena took the woman's hands, feeling calluses that matched her own barely faded ones. "Because someone did exactly this for me. My grandmother spent 53 years building something I never knew existed. She couldn't be there in person, so she left me freedom instead. Now I pass that freedom forward to you. Tears started immediately, the woman's composure breaking under the weight of hope after years of managing without it. I work 2 jobs and still can't get ahead. I feel invisible, like nobody sees how hard I try. I see you. Charlotte saw people like us. That's why this exists. Elena handed her the foundation application packet, already processed and approved through Victoria's early screening. Full scholarship, housing stipend, childcare covered. You're already accepted. You start next semester. The woman collapsed into Elena's arms, sobbing with the force of years of accumulated desperation finally meeting relief. Other guests watched this moment, understanding viscerally what the museum and foundation meant beyond abstract statistics. The dedication ceremony began as sunset painted the sky in amber and gold. Elena stood at the podium before the plaque that would mark this building's new purpose, Charlotte Morrison Museum of Dignity and Legacy. Her speech emerged from months of refinement, but delivered with warehouse authenticity that no amount of coaching could have improved. My grandmother lived in a 10 by 12-foot room for 53 years. She had access to millions but chose simplicity because she understood that wealth isn't measured in luxury. Wealth is freedom. Freedom from fear. Freedom to choose. Freedom to matter. Today we honor her, Kenny Rogers, and the invisible workforce who hold our world together. The housekeepers, janitors, caregivers, service workers who show up every day, do excellent work, and rarely receive recognition. Charlotte Morrison proved that loyalty and excellence create legacy. Now that legacy continues through each of you. The applause built like waves, thousands of people acknowledging truth that society usually ignored. Elena stood before them not as inspiration porn or charity case success story, but as someone who had experienced both sides of the economic divide and understood that separating them was artificial construction rather than natural law. That evening, after guests departed and the museum closed, Elena sat on the front porch watching darkness settle over Georgia hills. Danny joined her, adult now, but still her baby, heading toward a future she had helped build despite obstacles that should have crushed them both. Do you think Great-Grandma Charlie would be proud? Elena considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Honestly, I think she'd tell me I'm overthinking everything, that I should stop admiring sunsets and get back to work. Danny laughed, the sound carrying easy comfort. That sounds exactly like you. I finally understand where it comes from. Benjamin brought sweet tea, Southern tradition marking their chosen family status. Victoria arrived late from a board meeting, joining them on the porch where 4 people who had started as strangers now shared silence comfortable as old furniture. The voice that had been narrating Elena's journey since she stood before the steel door returned now, connecting beginning to end with understanding earned through surviving everything between. 3 years ago, I stood before a steel door in darkness, holding 4 numbers and wondering what I would find. Behind that door lived $265 million. But the real treasure was never locked in any vault. It was knowing, finally and completely, that I had always been loved. My grandmother couldn't be there in person, so she left me freedom instead. Freedom to stop surviving and start living. Freedom to honor the work that holds the world together. Freedom to believe that love finds a way across decades and distances and all the walls we build between ourselves and the people we should have forgiven long ago. The camera pulled back, rising above the porch, revealing the mansion fully restored and glowing with purpose. Further back to show the foundation building adjacent, lights burning late as staff processed applications from people whose lives were about to transform. Further still, the town of Fitzgerald spreading out beneath, lights coming on as evening claimed the landscape. Charlotte Morrison inherited nothing. But through 53 years of showing up and doing excellent work with unwavering loyalty, she built an empire of dignity. Now that empire changes lives every single day. Single mothers complete degrees. Service workers receive recognition. The invisible become visible. The final image returned to Charlotte's preserved room, narrow bed and handmade quilt, and single photograph of baby Elena. This simple space had generated everything: the fortune, the foundation, the transformation of thousands of lives. not through luck or inheritance alone, but through the deliberate choice to value excellence and loyalty over immediate gratification. The screen faded to text that would accompany this story wherever it traveled, dedicated to the invisible workforce who hold our world together, and to the grandmothers who love us across impossible distances. Sunrise began over the mansion, not sunset. New day arriving with new possibilities. Legacy continuing forward rather than dwelling in past. Elena stood from the porch chair, ready to begin another day of work that mattered. The steel door had opened 3 years ago, but the real journey continued every morning when she chose purpose over comfort, service over accumulation, dignity over status. Charlotte Morrison had taught her granddaughter across death and distance that wealth meant freedom, that freedom enabled choice, and that choice carried responsibility. Elena Morrison had learned the lesson well enough to build on foundations laid by hands she had never held, but whose legacy she carried forward into futures that Charlotte would never witness, but had made possible through decades of invisible labor finally recognized. The mansion breathed with the life of thousands of visitors annually, each person leaving slightly transformed by encountering a story that insisted their work mattered, regardless of whether society acknowledged it. The foundation breathed with the dreams of hundreds of people escaping poverty traps through support that Charlotte's loyalty had funded. And Elena breathed with the knowledge that some inheritances transcend money, that the truest wealth gets measured in lives changed rather than accounts balanced. The sun rose higher, painting everything in gold.